be recording this event and posting it onto YouTube, and you can share the link. It's going to be on our YouTube channel. But don't worry, only the people who are in the little yellow box, the people who are speaking, are going to be recorded. So likewise, if you have any questions for our poets this evening when we get the Q&A later on, please type them in the chat, and Rachel and I will take turns posing those. And then a few real quick things to go over as well. It is a hard time, as you all know, for independent bookstores and independent stores of all kinds. So we ask you all, please, Northshire really begs you, and all the other small businesses that you support and love, we're hoping that you shop early, of course, and shop local. This is, we're saying that November is the new December. Please consider doing that. Please consider, if you're coming into the bookstore to shop, do so in the mornings or on the weekdays. And okay, that is all of the sort of boring stuff, and I'm going to hand things over to my great colleague, Rachel.
Hi, everybody. Tonight, we're really fortunate to have with us two poets, both of whom were scheduled to read at Northshire Saratoga store this past spring. Dan, I was just saying, is the most rescheduled author in Northshire history, which is something of a record. These were events I was really looking forward to. As we all know, COVID had other plans for us this past spring, and still has other plans for us. So I'm really glad that we could reschedule and be here together tonight in this way. Both poets are going to read. Dan Curley is going to go first. He is an associate professor in the classics department at Skidmore College, and is here tonight in honor of Conditional Future Perfect, which is his debut poetry collection, and it was published earlier in 2020. And then following Dan, Jay Rogoff will read. Jay taught in the English department at Skidmore for 33 years, and he's the author of previous collections of poetry, including The Art of Gravity and Venera, and has celebrated every new book that he has written since Northshire Saratoga opened in the Saratoga store, and is with us tonight about his latest book, which is entitled Loving in Truth, which is new and selected poems. So please join me in welcoming two great friends to Northshire Bookstore, Dan Curley and Jay Rogoff.
Well, thanks, Rachel and David, for hosting, and thanks, Jay, whose idea this was. I think I'm really honored to be here with you. I don't have a career spanning 40 years in poetry, but I'll work on it, I promise. I'll read some things from Conditional Future Perfect, and then maybe I'll read some poems that have developed, I don't know, over the past 2 years or so. There's sort of a middle period, which I'm overlooking for now. So we'll just sort of see how it goes. I'll read the first poem in the book. It's called Tangential. I go off on tangents, my wife says, but I prefer to call them lateral thinking in action. How else would I have remembered the pork chops were left in the car if not for our starveling child making BLTs for lunch? Sure, there's something to the family motto, when a task is once begun, never leave it till it's done. But now here's the cat, tossing me come hither looks, rubbing her cheek and ear against the door frame. How essential to run fingers through the fur, over the arching back and up the victory column of the tail. My wife says I've been on tangents ever since I came out of the womb. I say being born was the tangent. I've made a life trying to get back to what I was doing before that. Thank you. Let's go on to a slightly longer one. It's called I Wish, which is a series of wishes, and there's also an end user license agreement at the end of the poem. I just want you to be warned. I wish this fly would cease its frenzied buzzing against the cellophane, and I wish the cat would realize my anguish and dispatch the crazy son of a bitch. A leap, a snap of jaws, a loyal show of atrocity and grace. I wish I had an elite corps of kitties in smart little vests, the feline force, scourge of the mouse-infested office, saviors of lost children. I wish corporations were corporeal so as to be invited for drinks and made to admit that no one needs that much money and be stuck with the tab. I wish I hadn't said what I said, take your pick, but I wouldn't wish to unsay it, except for when I critiqued my daughter and she vowed never to sing to me again. A pity, because her tones are pure as my wishes are sincere, and I wish she'd entrust her voice to my hearing just once. I wish the error precipitating Ovid's exile were as senseless and stark as being struck by a dune buggy on a dusky beach. I wish a librarian had cherished Sophocles as much as Euripides, enough to have smuggled the Tao volume home in his cloak the night before the library burned and the city tore itself to pieces, to have tucked, during the devastation, the poet into a party wall crevice with a prayer for his recovery, so that I might be certain of what Tereus did to poor Philomela, and how she and her sister exacted their revenge, however much one, after learning, might wish to unlearn it. I wish I'd been a better student of Greek, but I took it up at a time when my heart was bursting with wishes, mastering the Attic dialect not among their number. The girl who rescued me in those torpid moments after my ex became my ex and put me on the first bus leaving town, who talked to me despite my Union Jack t-shirt and stupid torn up jeans and the lunatic tears, or because of the tears, who called me boy and schooled me in jazz and made me wish Milwaukee would never arrive. I wish I could remember her name. I wish this poem had more substance, more bite. I wish it were sharper than it is. Its readers might wish the same. And my last wish is for you, that you achieve your dearest wish. Don't say what it is, only promise it's ethical. Matter of fact, by reading this far, you've already promised, and you further agree to hold me harmless for wishing you well, which might go against your wishes. But tough titty, said the kitty. All right, just keeping track of the time. All right, let's move on to this one. It's called Nothing New Under the Sun. It's exciting, there's some Latin in it. Get ready. Nothing new under the sun. Which Renaissance lunatic sent you to me? Because clearly you don't belong here. It's your faith in humanity betrays you, and the fact that you can't use the internet worth a damn. Say piacere to Leonardo when next you see him, and let go the mouse, which is neither a weapon nor a transmitter to the old masters. No, I don't know why they did what they did, your colleagues at the health department, as your colleghi at the Fullers Guild must have done too, but for being cowed by a woman of sense and scruples, sub sole nihil novum. No, I don't know why that page timed out again. Yes, I will love you until I die. That is for my wife. We're celebrating an anniversary today, but I'm not supposed to mention it. Whoops. Let me do something from the travelogue portion of the book. There are a few travel poems in the middle section. This is about an experience of being in the church of Santa Maria dei Cerchi in Florence, which is known as the Church of Dante and Beatrice. And if you've seen the movie Letters to Juliet, you'll understand this scenario, people writing letters to Juliet in Verona. Here at this church, people write letters to Beatrice as well, and there are just baskets of the letters. So this is sort of my experience in the letters. It's also written in Dante's Terza Rima. And I do like to also point out that I dimly recall drinking a beer called Terza Rima while I was writing it. So that's a fun fact for you. Letters to La Portinari. The Church of Margherita dei Cerchi has baskets overflowing with epistles to Beatrice. It might seem kind of jerky to rummage through them as I did, but this'll make up for my transgression. I would rather be made to eat a tiramisu of thistles than violate the secrets of a lover. I'd never touch a letter folded tightly, but those I did were easy to discover, their pages introverted only slightly, or not at all, the better for a nosy flaneur of middle age to treat them lightly. Of these, one seemed a boy's request. I suppose he was such, if not a hipster with an earring, or else a laxbro waxing proud and prosy, committed to the paper after hearing of Dante's love for B, a reverie worth rehearsing for its honesty so searing. Quote, Dear lady, what's being dead like? You're kind of famous now because of your ex-lover. If I could have a long and happy life, that would be cool. Signed, Mike. O Beatrice, who gaze upon this wide earth, is he a genius or is he a wanker? Would you in life have given him a wide berth or married him instead of daddy's banker? All right, what else have we got? Also from the travelogue portion. This is from my friend Greg, called Mare Nostrum. Summer came early to the shore today, a mosaic of bikinis and trunks and coolers and towels, a vivid, tremulous museum of flesh, though my display was closed for renovation. I walked shoeless through the hot sand and stood on the ocean threshold, the waves soothing my feet. My friend wanted a chair and umbrella, so we moved one beach over. No longer teachers, only tourists, renting a piece of sea and sky. He read his anthology. I listened to music and dozed, both of us dazzled by luxury and missing our women. Okay, let's see. Part 3 of the book's a little grim, but this one is sort of an unofficial conclusion to the travelogue, even though it occurs in part 3. It's called Being Back. Being back is more than reversing the steps taken when going away. I couldn't be back unless I came back, just as I went away in order to be away. Your constant notes from London, helpfully signed from London, made us dream of your drowning in the Thames and the chance to miss you properly. Informing us of your return spoils your being back, like arancini plucked from the oil too soon. Being back is more than vetting strange currency, which is done after coming back. It's the shabby art of tumbling into my lover's bed, even if my lover is me, and waking to some old nuisance, whiskers at my temple, dust in my throat. My daughter is also a very fine poet, and she likes it when she finds her way into my poems. In fact, writing about her is sort of one of my obsessions. I do have to tamp that down a little bit just so she doesn't get a big head about it. But here's a poem called Shoveling the Driveway with You, whose title is an allusion to Frank O'Hara and having a Coke with you. Shoveling the driveway with you. The night before the snowstorm, daughter, we spoke of your poetry class and the tropes of reading aloud, such as the art of the intro. And this is a poem about grief, you croaked into your fist, called Dead Dog Tornado. While I marveled at the voice within you that conjured so fine a collocation so naturally. The night of the snowstorm, you phoned me from the street, the plow having sealed off the driveway. Meeting on the porch where the shovels are, we made short work of it. You, the perimeter. I, the side to side. Was not quite young, but far less old than I had been taking my pills before bedtime. I feel a poem coming on, I said. I'll call it Shoveling the Driveway with You. Dead Dog Tornado, you said, brushing your sleeves clean of snow. I think I'd like to go back. I've seen Mark O'Toole, one of my former students in the audience, so this one is for him. He was the inspiration for this poem, though he might not know it. It's called Zanzara. I'll have to find it. Zanzara means mosquito in Italian, and when we were in Rome together, Mark and I, there were a lot of mosquitoes that May, so it's called Zanzara. The mosquitoes of Rome find me delicious as I find Roman cuisine. I woke and saw the Big Dipper on my forehead and cheeks, handle bent in a hole in the middle. I tossed my room hunting that mamone, bloated and punch-drunk on authentic American blood. No trace but the grim constellation spanning my face. I told a student I'd been brawling in Bukowski's bar. He didn't believe me, even after I socked him on the arm. Okay. Let's see. I think I'll read a poem from, again, going back to the last section of the book. It's always interesting to sort of be edited, and then you sort of realize the book is sort of found in the process of editing. My editor, John, was amazing, and I hadn't realized I wrote so many grim poems, but there you are. That's what editing is about. They sort of come to the surface. This is a poem called David. I do have many friends named David. There's my dear departed friend, David Porter. This poem is not about him. It's about a different David, though, who was a mentor to me. David, the last time I saw you was between books in the library stacks. You didn't notice me as you sloughed off to Latin or to meet Herb at Commons, where you and he insisted on eating lunch or eating during lunch rush, arms folded, a pair of ninnies waiting for a table, scowling at the 60s and the death of faculty privilege. I should have cleared my throat or headed you off, but we'd only just talked the year before. The story of metamorphosis hadn't changed a whit, and you look so tired, in your 50s, but 78 in alcoholic's years. I took in your tobacco aroma, mingled with dust and pulp from the volumes all around, and loved you enough to let you pass. Here is one. It's from an elegy series that I wrote and then quickly aborted. This is the one that sort of made the cut. I was trying to write in couplets, not in strict elegiac couplets, which are dactylic hexameter based, but just trying to write in 2-line snippets. This is the best of these. It's called Elegy 56. Of the things we still do to better, I'll start over. A little emotional for me. Of the things we still do together in bed, I don't sing. Let the muse cross her legs and recall from me the songs we sang as newlyweds long ago. Breaking up is hard, comma, comma, and when will I be loved? Working together, side by side, fumbling our way between unison and harmony, the end of solo and the start of sweet polyphony. There's no sharp line dividing when we used to sing in bed and when we stopped. No terminus post quem like 9/11 and waking up the next day to a changed world. I think it took years. The singing grew ever sparser until it was a thing living only in past tenses. Perhaps it's time to revisit the past, a matter of lying down, caressing her shoulder, softly, bravely striking up an old tune in the hope of reclaiming the urgent, innocent why of it all. And maybe one last one from the book. Page 56. Right. So 3 vignettes. It's called 3 novellas. So 3 smaller poems put into one whole. And so novella number 1. Story of a girl who doesn't realize her mother is really her older sister, and her little sister is her sister's daughter, that is, her niece. Her older brother, meanwhile, is actually her father, but not the father of her older sister, whose mother, now deceased, conceived her by another man who promised his mistress lifelong security in return for secrecy, with the results we see. Mother, sister, brother, father, sister, niece, all chasing the money while conspiring to give a girl a life without exploitation or gossip. They've become deft at dodging her awkward questions and learned to restrict her reading. No detective novels, no Orwell, and nothing by that prophet Sophocles. I should add that there was a genealogical chart that accompanied that piece, and it does check out. Number 2. Story of an old woman beset with dementia. Convinced she's a time traveler, sees in her reflection herself at 16 wearing her mother's earrings to the spring dance. Excited for the future, vows to leap forward and see the promise of tomorrow, not knowing she already has. Disappears one morning, a tremulous note beside her armchair. See you in time. Number 3. Story of a man too clever by half, obsessed with the question of why, if fire is a metaphor of desire, it shouldn't work in reverse. Crusades to invert the referential polarity, remakes his hearth as his heart, petitions school boards to hold passion drills, asks the cook at the cookout to love his meat well done, loses job calling in sick with burning desires of 103. Amatory fervor repels family and friends. Too poor to heat the house, dies of cold. That is, the lack of love. All right, so I have about 5 minutes or so remaining. Let's do a little bit of new work or more recent work. And here I'll switch to my computer, but I can read everything from there. Here's one called Final Thoughts. Final Thoughts. The reason I never got you a new bicycle is because I don't want you to do what my mother did after her parents died within months of each other, namely, ride your bike to the cemetery and sit for hours on the bench beneath the wall and pine. Instead, come to Rome, find the bar with the tree that grew from under the foundation and now arches skyward, each branch a miracle of lassitude. Or maybe they couldn't bear to prune it. Here's a poem called At the DMV. Not happy with the title, but pretty happy with the poem. So At the DMV. I got there when it opened at 8. The sign said they weren't doing licenses until 9. Still, the clerk had a look at my paperwork, taking extra care with my W-2. See you in an hour. I walked the desolate mall perimeter, past the shuttered stores of your childhood, Cato. They took down the carousel years ago, but I could still see it, and the horse you called Cowboy. He was prancing and kicking his hind legs. An hour later, I was back in line. I read the tiny letters in row 11 out loud, pausing to separate my E's from my F's. The clerk scanned in my documents. Stand all the ways back against the screen, she commanded. I put on my fake smile. She beamed at me. I love how I can read your handwriting. That's my paperwork printing, I told her. The stylus wasn't working with the camera. I said, it won't take no for an answer. Use your finger and barely touch it, she said, without looking up. Story of my life, I didn't say. How about this one? It's called The Enunciation. After 4 or 5 weeks, there was no more putting off the blood test. Good news, our doctor blurted out. Or maybe not, she added, saving face after scanning the 2 kids sitting opposite her desk, side by side and poles apart. We already had babies to raise. I, some notions about Ovid. She, phenolic eating microbes in glass reactors. We couldn't see that a door had opened. I remember the lights humming and streaks on low pile carpet that looked like salmon mounting a cataract. Let's see. Here's one written in response to the quarantine. I suppose that's inevitable. It's something of a hymn. I call it, I went to the big box store. I went to the big box store for the first time in months. I practiced social distancing and tried to follow the arrows. I touched my mask only twice. I said what more than once to my wife and other humans wearing smocks because my hearing is poor and their lips were unavailable for reading. I want to say it was sad, tiptoeing through my country's endgame, but it was thrilling to stand before a shelf with boxes of aluminum foil, to take one in my hands and to gauge its heft like an axe, to caress the toothpaste while placing it in my cart, to see firsthand the miracle of the jet dry, long considered extinct, to squeeze the Charmin with masked abandon. All right, 2 more, and then I will call it good. One is called Toward an Epic Cycle. Learn the rules. Infants exposed in the wild always survive and make beelines for the parents who cast them out. Oracles exist to be doubted. Brother must die by brother's hand. The bane that harms you is the boon that saves you, or vice versa, like aspirin. Clearly, the curious little old lady isn't a little old lady, and isn't curious so much as conniving, but you'll piss her off anyway, to your pain. Even goddesses get lazy, thinking a quick dip in the waters of immortality is more or less full immersion. In some distant, fated future, mortal enemies will find a perfect random spot to duel. A hangar, a power plant with catwalks and steam and the right amount of poor lighting. Conveyor belts lurch the plot forward or bring lovers into each other's arms to say, I hate you. All right, and let's do one more. Yes, this one is called Mansplaination. It's supposed to be a title to get your attention, but I try to work against that. Mansplaination. Actually, I just wanted your attention. There's nothing to unpack. You are perfect. Your words, perfection. Your chin, flawless. You, mine. In what sense? Not of belonging to me, but of me being devoted to you. Devotion is my strong suit, but we were talking about you, you queen of diamonds, you dazzling pearl plucked from the oyster's broken jaw. All right. And I think that's my time. Thanks, everybody. And Jay, I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have for us.
Dan, thank you. That was great. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I'm on. Good. Hi, I'm Jay Rogoff, and thank you very much, Rachel and David, for putting this together and doing all the tech. And thank you, Dan, for your lovely, lovely poems. It's really a wonderful first book, and everybody should buy it. I'll be reading from, as Rachel said, my current book, which is a new and selected, Loving and Truth. New and selected poems. And so it gathers together selections from my 6 previous books. There are over 100 of those, and there are 44 poems that haven't been in book form before. And so I think I'll divide my time. I'll read about half from earlier poems and half from the new poems section. When putting this reading together, I for some reason kept wanting to read poems that have to do with death and wanting also to read love poems. So there'll be a mixture of these in here, and some will have both in them. I'll start with a fairly early poem called Welcome to the Family. What you need to know, well, first of all, it's starting right off with death. And second of all, the word Zeta is Yiddish for grandfather. Welcome to the family. When my mother's Zeta died, the Brooklyn grave diggers struck. The corpse lay ready. The planks and pegs of his plain pine box required rot. So my uncles shed dark suit coats, hefted mattocks, grappled among graves with shovels, and built a hole. The men wore hats, and their beards shook fruitless sweat into the ground. They knew they had to work. Time and law demanded it. My father, the youngest, wore his new suit he'd saved for almost a year. Earth stuck and crusted it. The sun dampened them all, made their flesh heavy, redolent, rotten, the hottest August on the books. My mother, not yet round, but cousins buzzed like workers round the queen. Her skin flamed, her eyes glazed. She woke up in the limousine, her sister holding a compress to her head. Till 6 feet, my father shoveled. He faced a face of dark earth and felt made of sweat, and the cool ground crawling with vermin delighted him. He stood out of the sun at rest, his blue suit brown, then labored up ladder out of the grave to make a pallbearer, lurching under the coffin, shaking, making it disappear. After dragging earth out, Kicking it back in was a blessing. Cool grass grew next year on the grave when the living met to unveil the stone. I made the rabbi laugh. Gurgling and babbling, I puked on my father's new suit, but I can't remember. My goggle eyes couldn't focus the carved Hebrew letters of my name. Two love poems. These come from a sequence called Venera, and they're love sonnets. And the term Venera in my mind has to do with both Venus and venery, venereal things, and as well as veneration. So it's both the sacred and the profane. And many of the sonnets use controlling metaphors. These two happen to. This is called the arc. She's so well built, so trim, that any wind blows her gently. Despite the warped world, she weathers the wickedness of pimps and undertakers, steering by her constellated virtues, her living cargo through the roughest seas to port, where she must fend off smirks of sailors and smart remarks of salesmen, and she batters them back simply by averting her gaze. In the warm hold, hidden, the animals smolder, steam wafting from their hides and nostrils, spring coiling round them, long cooped up, kept chaste, a rumbling as in the guts of the earth. Can she keep these beasts clean, mad with their fast? This keen desire, desiring to give birth. It occurs to me that the cooped upness is very much like us during COVID. The Handmaid. After traveling all day, you'll arrive half dead, an inn where upstairs you'll discover a bed so made you choose to sleep forever, or immortalize the shredding ache of love as though such verging on climax were life. You'll ask, who is the angel of this chamber? And hearing water poured into a laver, turn and be taken by her. How to save her from these rooms, the dusty uniform in which she curtsies now. How to transform her, jewels, robes, what words of veneration. A kiss might lure her into bed, where you might barter some cheap ring. Such dreams, my hero, such velvet longings, such imagination. I've written a lot of poems about dance, and there we go. I've written a lot of poems about dance, and this is one of them. It's a poem dedicated to the wonderful ballerina Maria Kovarovsky, and the poem was written when she was a young dancer. She's going to retire next year at the age of 44, so it tells you how long ago this is. There's a mention of Balanchine, that's George Balanchine, who was the director of the New York City Ballet for many, many years, and brilliant choreographer. Making a fool of myself over Maria Kovarovsky, and I should let Dan know that the poem is in sapphics, as all poems about romantic insanity should be. Streamlined as the ornament on a Packard, swan in takeoff under the ghostly blue stage light, her face a sphinx-like impassive icon chocked with Tchaikovsky. She's a dancer Balanchine would have loved bone and sinew, heir to the muse's mantle, lunar cruel and stupid with genius, music, movement, and blank sex knocking not the crotch, but my chest and poor brain. Charming, more like paralyzed, eyes gone flashbulbs, air turned flame and raptured from lungs, my glib tongue dumbing to granite. Later, wrecked, I'm meeting her face to face, her 22 exquisitely unabashed years, smiling through some party our town has thrown these dancerly creatures. Cheese, champagne, some boxes of Girl Scout cookies. Glass in hand, Maria Kovarovsky, I say, you're dancing Thrilling's the only word. I sit in the dark, thrilled, smiling. She is cooing, how sweet. But no, it's hell, not sweet. I want her to know I'm kept up nights to partner succubus limbs that burn the phosphorus air. So quick they torch the dreck out of human passion. Moonlit arms abandoning me to darkness. Now her smile is faltering. Now my wife says, don't be afraid. He gets this way sometimes, but he's harmless, really. God, I've bought a pair of your satin toe shoes, battered, hardened, stripped of their ribbons, nude pink, ragged with point work. Shoes your feet have danced in, where sweat-conducted contacts sparked to generate light, divine toes crammed in boxes signed by your hand. My hands now fondling your footsteps. Hear me out, terpsichore, on my knee bones, drive me crazy, cripple my days with beauty, naked relics clutched to my cheek, I breathe their reek of sheer ether. Okay, down to earth a little bit. This is a travel poem. Dan has a number of them. I have a number of them. This is a travel poem called Carmelite Convent in Mexico, DF. In Mexico City, there is a Carmelite Convent museum that dates from colonial times. And as you will hear, there are some surprises in the basement. Carmelite Convent, Mexico, DF. Past portraits of sedate saints at desks like grade school principals, past dormitory cells where nuns once whispered prayers to iron bells, then sank to wooden biers and slept, we descended to the crypt. This death-intoxicated land gives skeletons the final chuckle. They play in a mariachi band, hack a laptop, dance flamenco, sing a feather boa torch song, soar on bat wings, fish, go drinking. Death makes mirth in Mexico. The jawbones slacken in a laugh. The lively eyeless sockets know nothing ends in an epitaph, for pleasure lies in getting stripped of everything. Then, in the crypt, the glass-topped coffins let us view the corpses of some denizens of a colonial century, some of abbots, some of nuns, others sporting finer dress, all whitened by the same distress. A person often mummifies in the capital's sapless climate. Though ancient gum sealed one nun's eyes, some woolen and some fleshly habit had worn away. Thus she gave us a peekaboo flash of naked pelvis. Others suffered harder wear, ribs poking out between the buttons, their boots sewn of the supplest leather for bourgeois metatarsal bones, each now clumsily damned to dangle from the slenderest, whitest ankle. We couldn't say they lay at rest because the mummified mouths stood open with this or that peculiar twist, as if their maiden glimpse of heaven contradicted what they'd heard. Every body looked appalled on death, or the death of an illusion. Though one skull, maybe once a lawyer, grinned with clean white satisfaction atop his once tight boiled wool collar, grown ample, the kid glove on his fist skinned back to bare a knuckled wrist. And I'll finish these earlier poems with a poem that takes place in Prague. It's dedicated to my dear friend, Steve Stern, who knows a great deal more about Prague than I ever will. But in Prague, you should know there are two Jewish cemeteries. There's the medieval Jewish cemetery, which is remarkable for its extraordinary crowding of headstones. And there's the modern cemetery on the outskirts of town, which is much, much less crowded. The old and new cemeteries for Steve Stern. With a slow, silent clatter, like dominoes, the stones, spotted with worn Hebrew, clamber over each other, as if they were prisoners clawing up to air over the backs of loved ones, trampling darlings deeper in the breathless chamber. The stones can barely stand, having exhausted underground by 1792, when Prague determined to close this rough medieval ghetto, the graveyard for Jews, and dedicate anew. A Jew goes into the ground, obeying an ancient text. A Jew must rot in the earth till the corpse is full perplexed in one dusty compound. This the bones comprehend when newborns first gulp breath, breath that burns like flame or soothes the lungs like snow, breath that begins to blow through city and tragic wood, whirling Eve and Adam, each dustman and bone maid, back to their filthy home. Into the ground they go. Rabbi Leur's ancient tomb stands a little aloof, a crown among snaggled teeth, with a dark plot of gum around it, a little Totenraum. The rabbi composts beneath, dutifully confounded with other human filth. He'd popped the letter shin into the mouth of his golem, who roared alive to avenge Prague's docile Jewry, living among the goyim as though behind plate glass, a stone's throw apart. Now suddenly astounded by their creature's gory rage, blood for a slaughtered milk cow or a smashed shopfront, vicarious fury sprung from the heart's locked attic, now loosed from a secret page. Ages from that neighborhood, the new graveyard is light and airy as a park. Its avenues run straight stones on every block. No crowding and shadow, no camp or old world ghetto. At a much trafficked corner lie the bones of Kafka, burnt offerings, bric-a-brac, scrawlings in demotic American litter the grave, each Elvis-like devotion corrupt with naivete, as if his corpse could hear, as if the bones could care, as if they held some truth to heal the mourner's clay. The sort of thing to drive all Kafkas back to bed, black covers over the head. In the new cemetery, the empty boulevards stretch for what seems miles, the sky the color of sifted ash. On the wooded alley past Kafka, the graves attain their end. Regardless of command, none comes tumbling after. The Jews, of course, went away on trains, propelled by breath, exhaust from the black earth, an orderly transportation no one had foreseen, and none dared prophesy, only to return in compounds of their own, a gray precipitation weightier than fog, to other earth than Prague. All right, let me read some of the new poems. One of the sections of the new poems is dedicated to my wife and muse, and they are called the penny poems. They're shorter than some of the ones that I've read. There are sonnets and other things like that among them. So I think I will read 3 of those. And speaking of muse, this one is called Musing. And it starts with a meditation on a photograph on which I've actually written many poems that shows my wife at the age of 15. Musing. How many poets have sung this photograph? Serious Penny, musing at 15, Keats labeled an unravished bride, and Donne conceived with cardigan and blouse tossed off. Arnold knelt on naked Dover beach, where pruny Eliot offered her a peach. Pricked on by his general of hot love, Shakespeare lurched into the breach. Tennyson made her his Maud, Chaucer his Alisoun. I've scribbled her a poem or two myself, fool's gold, plating the tribute of the ages, a 6-foot shelf of 60,000 pages, singing how this snapshot of my inchoate darling has launched 1,000 odes, a poem from every bard except the Beowulf poet, who never sang a girl but Grendel's mom. And let's see, Penny is an art historian, and so she spends a lot of time on art historical questions, some of which are theological, and some of which even have a bearing on life. This is called The Good Death. The Good Death. And it starts with Penny talking. When do those someday blessed in purgatory get to see God face to face, asks Penny. Her cues not personal, but academic. Not quite angels flirting with terpsichore on pins, but Roger van der Weiden's triptych. Those rays shooting from Christ's head, no holy gimmick, but radar to the widow of Jean Braque that masses and indulgences would work. Prayers are bribes, decreed the Council of Florence, promoting the dead like grade school. If you haggled, your ducats could chop centuries from the sentence, speeding husbands to beatific visions, like Roger's electric Christ. Or in Baghdad, a split second before the blast, the virgins dancing in the head of a fanatical man who dreams, like us, the best death is the small one. And lover, Dan had a cat in his poem, so I have to get even. Penny is, of course, also beloved of our cat Roger. This is called A New Lover. Again, it starts with a quote from Penny. "You won't believe what Roger did last night," sighed Penny, stretching like an odalisque. Where was I? Roger, clever as any cat, is batting the dangling shade poles. He circles me with his nose never leaving my body. It was so delicate, so erotic. I'd slept through this romance of 5 a.m. And he kept licking constantly, but lightly with his raspy tongue. Off in some other dream, I've missed my life again. And he never bit me, as she curved me a glance that slid from Titian's Venus to Manet's Olympia. Not once. A couple more. There's also a sequence of Adam and Eve poems in the book, and as you can see, the cover is the creation of Eve from Orvieto Cathedral, an extraordinary relief. I won't read that one, but this is a sonnet called Death's Sympathy, and and it takes place after the expulsion. There are three characters: Adam and Eve, of course, and Death, who is the he with which the poem starts. Death's Sympathy. And it sort of takes a little bit from Paradise Lost. He felt bad for them, not guilty, just bad enough to offer them some stately twangling on his ukulele as they left, straggling as in a funeral dance. He'd play their guide, helping them choose their rest stops while they cried tears, naturally. He'd boost their pride, rankling with rejection. He'd help the poor guy drudging. He'd shovel, jawboning side by side, same side his wife sprang from. Supermodel gaunt, bone thin then, now zoftic, apple-cheeked, windfall fed. But their endless busy work, toil, spin, each day wasted in digging a deeper hole. For what? Let her keep cooing at their son, nursing the one he'd heard them call, yes, Cain. And I'll end with this poem that's set in London, more travel, specifically in a pub. This is the barmaid at my local, the King's Arms, and it is called In the King's Arms. And somehow in the middle of the poem, Francois Boucher's painting of Mademoiselle O'Murphy makes its way in. I'm not quite sure how, but it's there. It's there. You know, it must be faced. In the King's Arms. The most beautiful barmaid in London pulls my delectable nectar. I sip from her hand best bitter. I drink her thrilling low rustle, £2.40. Black satin sighs on her forearm's tendon. I gulp my pride. London Pride is a brand of beer. I gulp my pride. She breaks my fiver. Her scarlet nailed finger makes me change. City suits swill with the animals, drink with the kinks. Their poison cloud condenses from a gross of cigarettes into a nimbus round her head. I'm undone by her spark upon my palm, undone by her black hair's current, her dark eye alight in the King's Arms. Boucher painted Mademoiselle O'Murphy tirelessly sprawled on her belly, a yummy trophy, marshmallow peep pink, a bunny blinking up to Louis off stage, teeny bopper thighs inching apart upon the satin sheet to dramatize her reverent rump. Now, as I like to tell my wife in galleries, that's what I call art. On break, she drags one deep. Down along her long back, her under thong tattles earthward into her jeans, all heaven perched on a bar stool, eternity clothed in an afternoon, her mouth contracting round her cigarette, and a stunningly mundane, smoky torrent of gossip. Aroma bathes me like dark over the earth. What's yours, she insinuates nightly, laboring in the king's arms, not mine. Thank you very much.
Dan and Jay, thank you both so much. That was really sensational and honestly just what I needed tonight. So thank you, both of you, for this wonderful evening. We have just a few minutes left. We could ask a few questions. So audience members, if you have any questions for Dan or Jay that you want to pose, please type them into the chat and we'll ask them. And I thought I'd ask, to sort of kick things off, how has writing been going in these months for both of you? We've been doing these online events since the very beginning of April, and we've heard from writers who say nothing's different, I'm writing exactly the same, and who say they have barely written a word, and pretty much everyone in between. So I'm curious how both of your experience of writing in this time has been.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually envious of Dan, who's written a Cobbett poem, I'm sort of in the same boat. I haven't really written poems, but what I've been doing is making notes because I'm mapping out what I hope is going to be either a long poem or a long sequence of poems that has to do with cities. And so the COVID, the pandemic has offered me plenty of material, visions of empty cities, cities of the dead, and so on. So, and I think all of that will make its way into the long work at some point. But mostly I've been writing prose. I'm also a dance critic, and so I've been working on various pieces of dance criticism and writing dance criticism based on dance I'm watching on video, and some of it shot with iPhones. It's very strange.
Yeah, things come in dribs and drabs, and if I sit down to actually write a poem about X or Y, it never works. I just have to take the inspiration when I can. Fortunately, I'm usually at my computer when inspiration tends to strike, so I'll write down a few things, but I've been working much more piecemeal lately. Sometimes I'm able to sort of sit down and get most of the poem out and then call it good, and then of course come back and do the necessary revising. But here it's been more like couplet by couplet or stanza by stanza or just even sentence by sentence, and I'll have to sort of put it away and come back. And that's been hard because I feel so fragmented, and trying to get back into the original mindset is so difficult. I'm doing a lot of revising as well. I do have a large backlog. I think the most recent poems in the book were published around, or were finished around, I want to say 2016. So that's a long time, which means that there's plenty of stuff to go through. And since revision has never necessarily been my strong suit, it's probably a good exercise. So that plus helping other students with their writing, and also just working on some of my own professional writing, which involves thinking about, you mentioned video, Jay, thinking about the ancient world on film. So I have a number of irons in that fire, and it keeps me going, but it's been interesting to say the least. It's hard to write poetry in these times, at least in the way that I used to. But maybe that's a good thing.
Thank you both so much. This has been a fantastic reading. We don't seem to be getting any questions. There's been lots of great laudatory comments about how wonderful this reading has been. So I think I'd like to ask maybe the last question of y'all, unless we get another one, and that is, we've heard terza rima and sapphics and heroic couplets and dactyls and sonnets and all kinds of stuff. Can you both talk a little bit about form? I was delighted to see all this formal poetry.
Yeah, I work a lot in form, and I didn't identify all the forms that my work is in. I mean, I've got some poems that I read that are in sestets, and I've written in ottava rima, and it gives me a medium through which the poem can flow. I find that when I'm trying to write free verse, which I also do, I'm confronted with a blank sheet of paper, and I have no imaginary form to give the poem at least a theoretical shape in my mind before I go in and write it, and that scares me a little bit, and it probably should not, but I find myself working much more fruitfully when I have a form, and using rhyme also suggests to me possibilities for language that wouldn't have been there had I simply been writing an unrhymed poem.
Interesting. I mean, because I teach Latin and Greek poetry, which is all about form and meter, and the way those intersect with concerns about genre and content. So maybe I'm in some way I'm reacting against that because I tend to do much more free form things. Though I do work in form as well. So you heard the terza rima. I do have a sapphic strophe as well in the book, dedicated to one of my mentors, Pierre Mackay. And I've actually, I really love sestinas, but I'm not sure I'm very good at writing them. They take a particular kind of energy that it's hard to muster, though I do have a series of 6 that try to tell the story of the Odyssey from the perspective of within the form of the sestina. I also set myself arbitrary rules too, in terms of syllables or in terms of sometimes it is just a purely visual thing with regard to line length, but I tend to just, I will work in that and then I will sort of undo that lest I feel too hidebound. So it's sort of, I have an interesting relationship with form. I'd like to work more in it. I also will say that my favorite form is actually the limerick. I'm really, really good at limericks, but since not enough people take those seriously, I haven't really published them. But I've always been good at working through rhyme and things like that. But it just doesn't seem to show itself in my work.
So you're working on a series of you're working on elegiac limericks, are you? Or
what I see, I've often wanted, because limericks are so they tend to be so arch in terms of their humor. I do wonder if I could rehabilitate the form towards something actually serious. That would be, I think, interesting.
I'd love to see
that.
I think this is a great place to stop. We have exciting, serious limericks, and Jay's long poem that I assume is going to be formal.
It's going to be in a bunch of
different, all of this stuff. And Dan talking about ancient poems. I'm a big Catullus fan. Well, this is great, and ancient poetry. We're stopping on lots of exciting things to talk about in the future, and maybe a bookstore event that we can see in the future. Jay, Dan, thank you so much. This has been a great night.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you to everybody.
Thank you so much, audience, and here's to doing this again in the store again.
Yeah, especially. Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Yes, order up.
Have a great night.